Hello everyone, welcome to StraightA. Dawson here, back on our video here today. We'll be talking about the Cincinnati Bengals here today, predicting their stats going into 2024-2025 NFL season. I'm really excited to get talking about this team because I love this team. I think they're going to have a really good bounce back year, even in a tough division, even in a tough conference. I think the Cincinnati Bengals are going to do very well, and hopefully we get to see Joe Burrow at full capacity once again. Before we get started, let's leave a like down below, comment any suggestions for videos future, and of course subscribe if you have not already. Without further ado, let's get right into the video. First of all, we always start off with the depth chart, so we're going to start once again. We're going to look at the Cincinnati Bengals depth chart. We got Joe Burrow at quarterback, of course, for Jake Browning as a good, reliable backup, we have learned. Zach Moss leading the charge and running back, sure, I guess. Chase Brown, sure, I guess. Trayvon Williams, sure, I guess. Chris Evans, sure, I guess. It's a really lackluster running back room. Joe Mixon at least provided some sort of star elite power. Don't know what Zach Moss is really going to bring. He showed some flashes last year, but was he really going to be number one running back? Not sure. Who knows? Looking at the wide receivers, though, we do have Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Jermaine Burton. Outside of Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, this is like nothing. I'm looking at like Trenton Irwin kind of has showed flashes or showed like talent at least. Charlie Jones, not very good. Cole Burgess. Like I'm just looking at their whole depth chart. They really need Chase and they really need Higgins. Honestly, I'm kind of biting my words looking at this depth chart right now that they were okay getting rid of Higgins because they have no fucking depth. Jermaine Burton, I guess, is fine. Trenton Irwin, I guess, is fine. But, like, they have nothing outside of those Chase and Higgins. Don't get me wrong. Looking at their tight end now, Mike Gesicki. Love Gesicki. I think he's a reliable tight end. Good in the blocking game, too. Overall, though, Tanner Hudson and Drew Sample are also going to add a little bit to the tight end. So, luckily, they got a little bit of variety when it comes to the team. Looking at the O-line, they have gotten so much better. Thank God the Cincinnati Bengals have added some depth and added some talent onto their O-line. Finally, this should be a good O-line for Joe Burrow. Looking at the defense, I mean, they're about as good as they have been in the past. They're going to be about middle, maybe a little bit above average in terms of defensive side of things. So we'll see how they actually end up lined up. But it's fine. You know, Logan Wilson, Trey Henderson, Geno Stone, I think is talented. All pretty good. B.J. Hill, kind of potential. Sheldon Rankins. It's good enough, that kind of stuff. Looks like a good depth chart, but mostly on the offensive side of the ball. Now, let's go ahead and review a little bit on the stat side of things. Let's look at Joe Burrow in the previous few years and what he has done. Joe Burrow, 2,300 yards in 10 games, so like you could probably safely say he almost gets 4,000, probably around 3,700. Based on the average. 15 touchdowns, again, probably can safely assume about 25 touchdowns and maybe 9 interceptions, something like that. Wasn't very good last year, and overall he took 50 sacks. Pretty all right. But again, 4,200 yards total if you take into account Jake Browning and all that good stuff. Actually, very interesting. A.J. McCarron, I just noticed that he was on the team. I didn't realize that. It's pretty cool. Looking at the previous year of that, we're going to see a lot of Joe Burrow. Really good stat lines. 4,500 yards basically. 35 touchdowns, 12 sacks. Pretty dang good most games pretty much across the board. 44 sacks total. Looking at Joe Burrow once again here in 2021. 4,600 yards, 34 touchdowns, 14 interceptions. Not the greatest touchdown to interception ratio, but definitely not bad. Then his rookie year, I believe, 2,700 and games played, 10 games played, 2,700 yards, 13 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. But I believe this is rookie year, right? 2020. So reasonable enough because Brandon Allen also played a little bit. So take it as you will. Joe Burrow has had 2 really damn good seasons in the past. So pretty cool to see. They've taken 48 total sacks there. And looking across the board, 19-11. Cool. So Joe Burrow, of course, when he's elite, like last 2 years he's elite. Of course, now we have 2 examples of seasons he didn't play fully and that he was not great. I mean, even if you took their average and see how far he would have done, he just wasn't going to be very good for this team's. Now, with that said, Joe Burrow does have talent. I think everybody knows that. I think he's still very smart as a quarterback. It's just he's got to stay healthy, and he had to have a good O-line. He has to have a good supporting cast. I think most of those things are in place where I'm not going to say he's going to be putting up 5,000 yards, but, man, he could be talented again. He could be the Joe Burrow we know and at least get into the 3,000s, if not 3,500, if not 4,000, if not 4,500 yards. I'll show you my prediction here in a little bit, but I think Joe Burrow will have a very, very good year. Maybe not necessarily a bounce-back type of year, but he should have a talented, very good year. Looking at the rushing again, this is really tough because I think Joe Mixon has been in this team for a hot minute now. Starting from 2020, Joe Mixon, 428 yards, 3 touchdowns. Fine, whatever. But then he finally kind of picked it up a little bit with 1,200 yards, 13 touchdowns, and one fumble. I don't know why I was about to read that. 814 yards, 7 touchdowns, and finally last year 1,000 yards, 9 touchdowns. Joe Mixon is a good good running back. I know some people shit on him, but his volume is damn good, and Chase Brown was a good supporting cast for him to kind of complement him. But Joe Mixon also just knew how to be a running back, and he was talented at being that. He's just reliable. Don't know if I see that from Zach Moss. Let's look at Zach Moss and his career. Of course, he's been playing since 2020. Hasn't really gotten that main of stay. The only year we can really use for example is the last year, 200 carries almost with 800 yards total, 4.3 average. Now that is decently good. I just want to say that right now. Zach, and of course, he was splitting with Jonathan Taylor. I think he had the main ball for like 6 games, and then moved on as a kind of half dual carry running back with Jonathan Taylor. 800 yards, pretty damn good. As the sole guy though, as the sole threat, especially on a team like the Cincinnati Bengals, which I think have improved more in the pass blocking, not necessarily the run blocking, I think it's really tough to say Zach Moss is going to do really well. I think he definitely has the potential to. But man, it's tough because he has not shown that he's a great caliber running back. He has shown explosive upside. He has shown that he can do the job. And he got 5 touchdowns. He's gotten 4, 1, 5. And apparently he's really good in the end zone, or in terms of like the red zone, getting into the end zone. So I could be very well wrong about him. I just don't know if I see him as a really, really big game changer for the Cincinnati Bengals. Looking at the receiving, though, Ja'Marr Chase, even last year, even with Joe Burrow mostly gone, he still got easily 1,200 yards. That's fucking crazy. Tyler Boyd, of course, now gone, 700 yards. T. Higgins, about almost 700 yards, 650 really. Looking at the receiving in the past, 1,000. They had 2 1,000-yard receivers. Easily could be possible again. Both T. Higgins and Ja'Marr Chase are that good, and they've had some high upside with the past seasons as well. Ja'Marr Chase, almost 1,500 yards, and T. Higgins, 1,100 yards, essentially 13 touchdowns, 6 touchdowns. Looking at the touchdowns, we'll go 9-7. We got 7-5. End zones have been hard without Joe Burrow there, but it's still been pretty all right. T. Higgins, again, 908 yards just before Ja'Marr Chase came in, 6 touchdowns. Tyler Boyd was 841 with 4 touchdowns. Looking at their tight ends, though, in the past, Drew Sample, 400 yards. Uzama, 500 yards. Hayden Hurst, 400 yards. Last year, Tanner Hudson, 350 yards. Not very big utilization from the tight end. But then again, this is the first year I think they don't have a good third receiver, or at least a potential where the tight end could essentially be the third receiver. Could we see that change this year with Mike Gesicki being really, really damn good? Maybe. We'll see. It's kind of just a prediction we have to kind of look at and hope for. Defense, though. Looking at the sacks here and looking at the interceptions, they got 44 sacks, 17 interceptions. Like I said, I think they're above average. I just don't think they're anything talented, especially going into this year. Boom, boom, boom. Looking at next year. Sorry, had to get my mind around it. That's the returning and scoring, all that. They had 30 sacks and 13 interceptions. Again, this is when they were a little bit worse. They kind of added talent recently. 42 sacks, 13 interceptions. Again, somewhere around average. Defense, once again, 17 sacks, 11 interceptions. Not very good in 2020. So the Bengals have definitely improved since 2020. And 2023, I think that they're pretty much at their peak. But I think they did go down just a little bit. I think they'll go down a little bit again this year. That's kind of pretty much all the big stats lines here. I do have Mike Gesicki's stats pulled up because I meant to do that. Mike Gesicki has broken 700 yards twice in his whole career, and he's been the main focus at most of these teams a lot of times, So we'll see how well he does this year. He finds the end zone a decent bit, but tight ends usually do if they're using the receiving game any bit. So I'm kind of curious how this all turned out for Mike Gesicki. I don't think he'll break 700 yards, but we'll see. Anything could happen, especially in this team with him being probably the third most talented pass catcher. But we'll see. We'll go into our stats now to see how the Cincinnati Bengals, I predict, will go. The Cincinnati Bengals, of course, are our topic here today in my predictions. And first of all, I think Joe Burrow will almost return to form in this next year's NFL season. I think he'll get like 4,100, 4,200 yards. I think he does have the potential to go even into the 4,600s again, but I think he'll start off slow, coming back into the swing of things. 4,100, 4,200, but I don't think he'll get injured this year. I think I'll give him 31 passing touchdowns. I thought about increasing the interceptions. I'm gonna go 9. I don't know. I feel like a lower interception ratio is pretty all right for him. And then he'll probably get around the 150, 200 rushing yards. I didn't really talk about his rushing ability really much, and I think he'll get 3 random rushing touchdowns. I think it's pretty high for him, but I don't know. I think he's going to feel pretty young again. I feel like he's going to feel pretty good. Either way, I think Joe Burrow has the talent to do it, and I think that with the supporting cast in the wide receiver game, even though they're not really above average good, I think a lot of the ball will be spread out after Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, enough for him to kind of reach that 4,000 mark. And it does make me curious, like, oh man, do I put Joe Mixon, put T. Higgins into the 1,000 yards receiving? And well, the answer to that is yes. I do think that they're going to have two 1,000-yard receivers again. I think Jamar Chase will see less productivity due to T. Higgins being more involved and Joe Burrow back in the game. But I think he'll also receive more because Joe Burrow's back in the game. Because Jamar Chase had 1,200 yards last season. I think he'll get to almost the 1,400s. But, of course, the ball will be split a little bit more because I think T. Higgins was underutilized last year. But I think between the two of them, they're going to do very, very well. And that they're going to get both a lot of love. I think Jamar Chase is going to see a lot of receiving touchdowns. Really didn't talk too much about the receiving touchdowns, but I think 11 is pretty high for him, and I think he will get that. T. Higgins, I thought about going a little bit higher. I could see 7. I could see kind of in that range, 5 to 7 basically. So I decided 6, and I think he'll get basically 1,050 yards, something like that, and six receiving touchdowns. I think this is pretty good, and of course I think Mike Gesicki will be the 3rd leading pass catcher in this team. And I think he'll have a good receiving game. I think he'll be in the 600s, maybe high 500s, but I think he'll mostly be utilized in the receiving touchdown game. Maybe you can see 4, maybe you can see 5. I think 3 is a good number for Mike Gesicki. He's talented, but will he be utilized compared to like the depth they have at tight end? I'm not too sure. So I'm going to go under 700, 3 receiving touchdowns. So we'll go with that. So that'll leave about basically 1,100, 2,700, 3,200 yards already done, and then they split the rest of the 1,000 yards left so between a bunch of other receivers, tight ends, and all that good stuff. Going to those lines, 40 to 50 seems like a pretty good number, a little bit lower on the end for all of them in the past. So I think they're going to do pretty well. I see like 43 sacks allowed. We'll go with that. Sack predictions in terms of how many people are going to sack, 44 to 40 seems pretty reasonable. I'm just going to go with it. I'm not going to go super in depth of this defense is really good, these defenses are real bad. I think they're above average or slightly above average. I think they'll do fine. 14 to 16 interceptions, again, around that average number or at least a little bit above. I think they'll do fine. Then looking at their opponents, looking at their schedule, they are in a fucking tough schedule. It's not easy. It's not an easy schedule because they face some good quality teams as well as some teams that could just randomly upset them. First of all, in this division, I don't think I can give anybody more than a 3-3 except maybe the Ravens. I can give 4-2. I'm just going to go by base in this division to say I'm going to go 3-3 for each of these teams. I just think it's really safe to say that. I think I did that for the Baltimore Ravens, if not 4-2. I forgot what exactly I did, but again, these are estimations, not like predictions. So I'm going to go 3-3 for the Bengals because they do compete very, very close with a lot of these teams, even though they're on paper a really better team. So we're going to go 3-3. I think if you look at the Broncos, the Patriots, and Commanders, I think one of these games could be an upset. Don't know which one, but we're going to give them basically 2-1 in that range, 5-4. I think they split these games right here between the Eagles and the Raiders, or at least could split them, so that's 6-5. But I think they're away games. They could go a little bit higher on that because Cowboys, I think they could easily beat them. I think they easily could beat the Giants, the Panthers, and the Titans. So we're going to basically go 3-1 here, so 9-6. And I think they're going to easily kind of split these games 10-7. I think they'll go 10-11 wins. I think I feel really good about them winning 10. Like 10 is their floor. I was really hard on them in this because that was giving them Division 3-3. That's giving them that they lose one of the Commanders, Broncos, Patriots games, which I don't think is that unlikely, but also very realistic that they could sweep all 3 of those teams. And they could beat the Chiefs. They could beat the Eagles. They could, beat the Cowboys, or at least all 4 of these teams right here. It's really tough. And the division is really where I gave a lot of the unleeway in their losses. So I feel good about 10 being their floor, 11 being a really, really good number. And could they go 12? I think they fucking could. But I'm going to keep it 10-11 because I think this team is still ramping up into things. And I think their run game is still a little bit weak. So I'm going to put them in the 10-11 win category. But I think they'll bounce back and finally be maybe a top division. I'm not too sure how I'll rank divisions just yet. I think Ravens still have probably a better choice in that. But never know. For now, I'll go 10-11 wins for the Cincinnati Bengals, and that will be the video. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll stay tuned for the next one. The Cleveland Browns are up next.